as this brother and sister were about to go on a date, a hunter ambushed them, instantly slaying the boy. But inexplicably, the boy regenerated, springing back to life. The hunter was there to rigorously test their regenerative abilities. Because of this, he mercilessly slaughtered the two siblings, again and again. Each time they died and regenerated, the hunter gained precious experience points that helped him level up. This agonizing cycle lasted for years. After he kidnapped them and locked them away in a dark basement, he wasn't the sole tormentor harvesting these siblings. To relentlessly level up, he formed a guild with the 5 most powerful hunters, and they all exploited these siblings to climb ranks and become the strongest S-rank hunters in the entire country. Each hunter employed a different, horrific method to level up, and some of them even went far beyond just merely eliminating them. But these siblings belonged to an immortal species, blessed with endless regeneration, forcing them to endure the agonizing pain of dying over and over again. One day, the hunters departed from the basement, without bothering to lock their cage, believing them too weak to move, and only able to regenerate if they died. On that fated day, these hunters had urgent business far away, as they were the renowned, strongest hunters who'd defeated the S-rank demon. However, one of them chose to stay behind, wanting to grind out a few more levels, using the siblings. Meanwhile, back in the basement, the brother remained agonizingly pinned to the floor. The girl's spirit was utterly shattered. Those monstrous hunters had used every part of her body to try and cleanse herself. She theorized that by destroying her own body and regenerating, maybe she could finally feel clean. To free her brother, she brutally sliced off the parts that had him pinned to the ground. Then, needing to trigger his regeneration, she plunged her hand right into his heart. Upon eliminating her brother, our girl leveled up. It was a possibility she'd never even considered. Those monsters had been doing this for ages. That's how they became so ridiculously strong. Her eyes gleamed with pure, unadulterated malice. Both of them needed to get their revenge. Even if it meant committing that very same sin, she was going to see it through. Her brother understood her intentions perfectly. His simple reply, "Do it now." Within that dark and freezing abyss, they repeatedly killed each other thousands of times, almost reaching 1,000,000 deaths. They were now on an entirely different plane of existence. When the hunter finally descended into the basement, ready for his twisted games, he witnessed pure terror. The two siblings were evolving together. He shrieked that only he was allowed such power. Then, in the blink of an eye, as the siblings regenerated, their bodies pulsed with immense power. That defenseless, weakling look was completely gone. They were now like fierce, predatory wolves, poised to attack. He even stumbled back in sheer terror. But then he remembered, he was an S-rank, the absolute pride of the entire country. So he summoned his magical beast to fight. The boy had seen this trick before and remained utterly confident. He gently pushed his sister aside, telling her to witness how much they had changed. His posture was now as cold and unyielding as ice. Not even the terrifying glare of a dragon could intimidate him any longer. Even with her newfound strength, the girl was still deeply afraid, after everything they had subjected her to. So her brother shielded her like a valiant knight. The ensuing battle between an S-rank and a newly evolved immortal was absolutely brutal. The S-rank strength and combat experience just weren't enough. The boy completely drained the S-rank's energy. "You will pay for this," he declared, in the worst way imaginable. Many agonizing hours stretched on. The brother destroyed and regenerated the S-rank's body, dozens upon dozens of times, making him truly feel what they had endured for years. When the other hunters finally returned, they found a guild member grotesquely tied to the basement ceiling, his body utterly decimated. He was barely alive, but not even healing magic could save him. The leader of the hunters then made a tough call. He put his friend out of his misery, slicing him in two. Shakera was furious, but Haruto calmly explained they simply couldn't save him, and it was an act to end his suffering, nothing more. Now, their top priority was getting revenge, to make those two absolutely pay for this injustice. Meanwhile, Shin and Minori are desperately fleeing through the forest at night, until the younger sister can't run a step further. an intense pain searing through her legs. The two decide to rest, just for a moment, and the incredible reality that they've finally escaped begins to truly sink in. Shin gently strokes Minori's hair. After surviving that living hell, he vows to protect her no matter what. Suddenly, the exhausted girl falls asleep in her brother's lap. He knows just how utterly exhausted she is. He resolves to stay awake and absolutely alert, knowing the guild could come after them at any moment. However, sleep slowly begins to overcome him, and he fights desperately to stay awake, knowing he simply cannot fall asleep. Suddenly, Shin notices two shadowy figures running in the forest. He jolts awake with an immediate surge of adrenaline. He feels the unmistakable, chilling presence of malice, the very same as those who tortured him for years. Believing Minori will be safe right there, he takes off at blinding speed, chasing after the aggressors. He relentlessly follows the source of that chilling malice, until he reaches a secluded house deep in the forest, figuring they'll soon notice his presence. Suddenly, a man silently emerges from the shadows right behind him, and brutally stabs him in the neck. A strange group of people instantly appears, emerging from between the dense branches, surrounding him completely. He wonders who are these men, as he has never ever seen them before. The attackers encircle him from all sides, leaving him utterly cornered. They know he's precisely the man they were looking for, but then they remember there was also a woman. 500 million just to kidnap one single person? In their minds, this was going to be an incredibly easy job. The group's mage then unleashes a powerful spell, casting a strength spell upon her colleagues, empowering them. Excited by his newfound power, the first of them brutally strikes Shin, still thinking this task is far too easy. Watching the young man crumple to the ground, his bones seemingly shattered, Jin then casually snaps his neck back into place, leaving everyone utterly stunned. They know for a fact he should be dead. He asks if they're guild subordinates, but when they don't answer, he decides their identity doesn't matter. Suddenly, he vanishes, reappearing to strike from the flanks, catching one enemy completely off guard. He lands a brutal punch to the gut. Anyone who dares direct malice his way, no matter who they are, becomes his enemy. Two men advance, managing to tear off Shin's arm. However, he grabs his own severed limb and throws it, landing a punch straight on the target's face. As he takes one down, his arm rapidly regenerates, and he immediately prepares to attack another foe, delivering a powerful punch with his newly formed arm. After dispatching 3 of them, he notices only the mage with the staff remains. She's visibly terrified by his raw strength, and casts a spell called Purple Light. It hits him squarely. No matter how strong, he can't avoid the magic beam's impact. But to her utter shock, Shin gets right back up without a single scratch. Stunned by his regeneration, the mage frantically casts more spells, firing more purple beams his way. But he just keeps getting up, unfazed by the damage. The moment she tries to flee, he won't let her. Shin chases her down, and after hanging all the enemies in the trees, he steals clothes from one of them. He decided to spare their lives. He then returns to take care of his sister. He apologizes for waking her up. Nori asks where he got those clothes. Shin lies, saying a kind person gave them to him. His sister is happy he also brought clothes for her, and she gets super excited. Now that they've changed their clothes, they decide to continue down the dirt road. The immortal siblings continue their journey toward freedom. Shin believes if they go a little further, the guild won't be able to find them. They decide to rest beneath a majestic waterfall. He then built a fire safely hidden behind the cascading waterfall. Luckily, he'd brought food enough for both of them, allowing them to finally regain their depleted strength. The mercenaries they'd encountered were carrying weapons and emergency rations which Shin had wisely snatched. However, none of them carried any useful information. Shin informed his sister that he was heading to the tower to gather intel and stock up on essential supplies. He urged Minori to remain hidden and safe. Upon arriving in the bustling city, he was utterly astounded by its advanced technology. He managed to sell a piece of their stolen equipment, which fetched a surprisingly large sum of money. This windfall allowed him to purchase a generous amount of supplies. With his newly acquired funds, he could finally ensure his sister was well fed. But he still pondered his next move. After all, Abe had been the weakest of their captors, and the others were far more monstrous and dangerous. He absolutely had to uncover their weaknesses to ensure he could drag every last one of them to hell. Looking up, he spotted an airship in the sky, broadcasting shocking news. The S-rank hunter, Toru, had been confirmed dead. Kira appeared live on screen, lamenting that his friend, who had always stood by their side, had been brutally tortured and mercilessly murdered. He dramatically declared they would never forgive those who dared take Abe's life. Then, to incite public outrage, he displayed the faces of Kiryu, Shin, and Minori, fueling the public's fury. Now Shin finally understood. The enemies from earlier had been hired specifically to kidnap them. During the same broadcast, Haruto directly addressed Shin, stating Shin would inevitably face the consequences, and that hiding was utterly useless. They would find him no matter what. The sensational news caused a massive uproar among the population, who now clamored to see the two siblings eliminated. They wouldn't forgive the criminals, demanding vengeance for Abe, their fallen hero. Shin realized Kira was cleverly concealing his own heinous crimes, and felt a solemn duty to drag him down to the underworld. The scene abruptly shifted to the past. Just a few days prior, the Kiryu siblings had, against all odds, managed to escape. Meanwhile, Shirkara was furiously punching a subordinate, enraged that he'd failed to bring back any decent information, utterly deeming him useless. Aya stated they'd already leveled up enough, and it was no longer necessary. Saya was deeply concerned that what they had done to the Kiryu siblings would be exposed. Haruto calmly reassured him, saying he would make the world see them as heinous criminals. To ensure that wouldn't happen, he knew no one would believe the words of fugitives, with a 500 million bounty on their heads. Kongo, however, interpreted this as a plan to let them get away alive. After what they had done to Taro, outraged, he declared he couldn't forgive them for torturing his comrade, Taro. He vowed to capture them both and unleash a hell they'd never seen before. I understood how he felt, but pointed out that Taro was the weakest among them, which was why he had been targeted. Enraged, Kongu lunged to punch the mage for speaking ill of their fallen comrade, but magical restraints suddenly materialized to hold back his strike. The mage who had cast the spell told him to calm down, as she didn't believe the siblings posed a real threat to them. For Kongo, however, it was a matter of vengeance, not fear. The argument ended when Kira interrupted them. There was a message written in Teru's blood. It warned they would eliminate them all, which meant the siblings still saw them as targets. Haruto assured everyone not to panic, as he knew the Kiryus would show up soon. The world was on their side, since their names, faces, and the bounty had been made public. Information about the two was bound to surface soon. When Kongo tried to argue, Haruto said that panicking wouldn't help, as they were world-renowned heroes. They needed to prepare to face the Hell Lords, and would rest for now since they were all exhausted. Chikara, however, couldn't rest. With so much resentment boiling inside him, he was determined to hunt down the two of them and wipe them out. Meanwhile, at the waterfall, the two siblings were together. Minori had slept soundly there. Illusion magic had blessed her with a peaceful sleep, completely unaware of any impending threats. After resting, they knew it was time to leave. It was too dangerous to linger in one spot for long. He warned Minori they were now outlaws, their faces recognized in every city, and they absolutely needed to be careful. So, he came up with the brilliant idea of wearing masks to completely hide their faces, even if it slightly blurred their sight. The Kiryu siblings quickly put on the masks, and agreed they worked perfectly, even if they encountered any enemies. As they prepared to leave, Minori asked Shin if they had a particular destination, and her brother confirmed he'd prepared one. They were heading to a dungeon, a realm completely separate from the real world, and concealed behind a mystical gate, where the laws of the common world held no sway. It was a location where ordinary people weren't allowed to step foot. The dungeon's terrain was incredibly difficult to traverse, but simultaneously perfect for hiding. According to the guide he'd purchased in the city, there was a deadly poison swamp at the top of the mountain. As this was an extremely dangerous area, hunters would rarely go there to search for them, making it their perfect secret base. Soon, they discovered the region's mystical gate. No matter what, they vowed to stick together. Holding onto each other's hands, they bravely jumped into the portal. Upon arriving, they were stunned to see that the swamp truly looked as poisonous as rumored, even though it was a place no one else could enter. Because of the pervasive poison, they decided not to drop their guard. After all, a clever hunter could use a poison immunity potion and attempt to capture them at that very moment. Suddenly, he stepped on a plant trap that pierced his brain. He immediately warned his sister, if she stepped on those vines, seeds would be shot out, as the entire area was teeming with traps. Just as she realized they couldn't possibly relax, she pointed to something directly ahead. Spotting a giant white wolf and a colossal black wolf, the siblings stood frozen in shock. He told his sister not to worry about the monsters, as he would personally take care of them. He charged straight at the creatures. Leaping high, he landed squarely on the wolf's back, unleashing a punch of overwhelming force, effortlessly shattering the black wolf. But then, the white wolf devoured half his body. Minori froze, but he regenerated in an instant. Despite his fear, this dungeon monster's speed and strength were on a whole other level, even stronger than Abe Teru and his chimera. Minori cast a spell to protect her brother. It was an enchantment that made his severed arms and legs move on their own, attacking the monster. The two severed hands pried the wolf's mouth open, revealing its gaping maw. He then charged straight into the creature, piercing right through it and ending the fight. Exhausted, he was panting and sweating heavily, making his sister worry. Though he had successfully finished the fight, he was visibly tired. Believe it or not, the ability he used to defeat the wolf had only manifested thanks to Minori's spell. Seeing red lightning coursing through his body, he commented on how incredibly useful it was, as it had helped him win. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a month after the siblings' escape, Kongu picked up a giant stone. While his subordinates battled monsters, he hurled the rock with maximum force, effortlessly defeating the blue wyverns. He then charged at another one, and began to brutally rip off its wing, leveling up in the process. As expected of Kongu, he took down the wyverns with extreme ease. Later, in a cave, while eating, Kongu asked where the siblings were. His men told him not to rush, as rumors said, all hunters were desperately searching for them, because of the bounty. One of the subordinates then revealed something even more important. He had heard from a friend that the boy now wore a mask. Just a few days ago, this friend, who went to clear the poison dungeon, saw Kiryushin defeat a poison snake with his bare hands. A poison snake is an A-rank monster, whose venom could easily fell an elephant. None of them could fathom a human being taking down such a monstrous creature. To Chikara, though, it was baffling that such a powerful warrior existed, one he knew nothing about. The fact someone had defeated an A-rank snake barehanded made him eager to meet this mysterious masked man. The subordinate stated the event had occurred 3 days prior, and that the boy must still be in the dungeon. Knowing it was a restricted and highly dangerous area, one of the men tried to argue with Kongu, but the consequence was a devastating punch. He then declared they would go to the poison swamp. Immediately, Kara was thrilled to find the masked man. Back in the dungeon, the protagonist senses something amiss. Startled, he climbs a tree to watch the portal, feeling a presence drawing ever nearer. He's certain it's Kongu. When he says he's going out to meet him, Minori begs him to stay. Our hero, however, tells her to calm down, explaining that they are stronger now, too. This was the perfect chance to finally get their revenge on the brute. He tells his sister not to look so worried, assuring her everything will be fine, since he can't die. Still, Minori urges him to be careful, pointing out that despite his immortality, Kongu is stronger than Abe. She then uses her enchantment to boost her brother's strength, and he dashes off. He moves stealthily through the trees, activating a spell to expand his field of vision. He finally locates his target, Kongu. He's near the swamp's entrance, clearly waiting for him to come closer. Spotting a poisonous boar nearby, the protagonist decides to use it for his trap. He cuts his own finger with a knife and casts an illusion and hypnosis spell on the creature. He then commands the boar to run toward a horde of other poisonous boars, luring them into his trap. Upon seeing the herd of boars rushing toward them, Kongu and his lackeys consider it a perfect warm-up. He orders his men to stop trembling and attack the creatures. effortlessly crushing the beasts. Kongo bellows, demanding more foes, finding the battle insultingly easy. After single-handedly decimating the herd, he boasts about his effortless victory, but his worn-out lackeys beg for a break. But Shirkera utterly refuses to listen. One of his men groans from utter exhaustion, his breath coming in ragged gasps, before violently coughing up blood. Soon, his skin and the others begins to melt, as they all choke on copious amounts of blood. Kongu, catching a scent of poison, finally grasps why his men are collapsing. He knows poisonous boars simply don't unleash this type of toxin when they're killed. He wonders what's happening, and just then, the protagonist appears behind him. He strikes, but Kongu blocks the blow with ease, turning around to face the masked man. He realizes the terrifying rumors are true. The hero then fiercely lunges forward, managing to slice Shikera's hand with his blade. Even with the blade impaled in his hand, he retaliates with a devastating punch. The protagonist is sent soaring backward, reeling from the sheer force of the impact. The wind from the strike alone was immense. Kongu's explosive movements and resilience confirm every rumor about his monstrous strength. Kongu rips the knife from his hand, declaring he's taken a liking to him. The masked man explains he adores the strong, and utterly despises the weak. His lackeys perished because they were weak. Convinced of the masked man's power, he invites him to join his formidable group. If he were to become his subordinate, under the mighty banner of Byakuren, he would gain money, honor, and women. All of it would be his. Kongu then asks if the offer sounds appealing. He repeats what he'd said moments before, about adoring the strong and hating the weak. He thought the men he brought to the swamp had potential, but he was gravely mistaken. They annoyed him to no end, and now, he regrets not using them as mere punching bags. The protagonist remembers the torture he endured, and demands to know why he torments the weak. Shirkera simply shrugs, claiming he finds it amusing. He describes the thrilling rush he gets from punching the weak. Their reactions are always exactly the same. They grovel, apologizing, all spouting the same pathetic lines. And seeing their faces twist in pure terror, it makes him laugh. Their desperate expressions entertain him endlessly. Hearing this, the hero erupts in a furious rage and charges forward. He lands a solid punch right on Shikera's face. Kongo, however, believes that as true men, they are destined to fight. He even praises the protagonist's impressive punch. Immediately afterward, he winds up for an incredibly powerful blow. But Shin, quick as a flash, manages to dodge to the side. In the very next moment, Shin whips out his dagger and expertly stabs the villain's arm. Kongo never planned to let Shin leave this place alive, but he acknowledges his opponent is incredibly strong. Shin was already certain Shirkera was an absolute monster, and this was confirmed yet again. He watched as Shirkera prepared a truly brutal punch, his face overflowing with pure, unadulterated hatred. The explosive, bone-shattering blow lands squarely on Shin, sending him flying. After being launched through the air, Shin felt it was the heaviest blow he had ever received in his entire life. He believed he had just experienced the absolute peak of Kongo's power. Kongo strides closer, and asks if he managed to withstand the impact. To Shin's utter shock, Kongo claims he was holding back, using only 30% of his full strength. This shocking revelation leaves Shin completely stunned, unable to believe that wasn't a full power blow. His enemy, however, encourages him to use everything he has, including all his weapons. He boldly declares he will withstand any attack. The masked man throws at him, just to definitively prove who is stronger. Shin lunges forward with his knife and slashes wildly, but the blade shatters instantly against Kongo's impenetrable body. Kongo states that at his full strength, a dull knife like that wouldn't even leave a single scratch. He declares that Shin must have understood the immense power gap between them by now, and that he absolutely cannot win like this. Shin, however, responds with a furious flurry of punches. Shirkera then remarks that he's the very first to ever challenge him this way. Yet, even after witnessing his power, this only made the villain admire the masked man even more. He retaliated with a devastating kick. The impact sent our protagonist soaring once again, Excited, he slammed the boy to the ground. However, he was quickly disappointed. He had placed such high hopes in Shin, and now believed him to be dead. But then, Kongu noticed a pool of poison on the ground, and a moment later, a knife plunged into his shoulder. He found it impossible that Shin's skin remained intact, even after sinking into that pool of poison, and branded him inhuman, though he still couldn't recall who he was. Suddenly, Shirkera seemed to recall something, and charged at the masked man with everything he had, trying to grab our hero who dodged the blows. Kong Ho then charged a punch with magic, and slammed it into the ground. The blow shattered the entire area, causing an explosion that swept Shin away. The attack left a large crater, and the impact knocked his mask to the ground. Upon seeing the revealed face, Chikara's reaction was to laugh hysterically, realizing it had been the immortal all along. He declared he had been looking for Kiryu Makoto Shin all this time, and had finally found him. Chikara couldn't believe the masked man was him, and realized that Shin had only withstood the attacks because of his regeneration. He exclaimed that he had been searching for him for a long time, to avenge Taro's death. With this revelation, he changed his mind about making Shin an ally. Filled with hatred, he declared that he would eliminate him. Our protagonist, in turn, replied that this wouldn't satisfy him, as he would do far more than just eliminate Kongu. Chikara and Shin faced off, and the brute charged forward again. He hurled rocks in the protagonist's direction, and one came with such speed that it tore off his arm. Immediately after, Kongu prepared an overhead kick, and as the blow landed, he yelled that he wouldn't let the immortal escape. This time, the kick shattered the ground, widening the crater even further. However, our hero remained unfazed, and blasted toward Shin at full speed, popping up right before him, and delivering a fierce punch to his face. Kong Ho barely flinched from the blow, then reacted, asking if that's all he's got, to show him the true meaning of a punch. He landed a devastating punch straight to Shin's face, sending him crashing into a rock, spitting up a torrent of blood. Suddenly, he noticed the immortal was actually trembling after his devastating blow. Kong Ho roared with laughter, as pure terror radiated from the boy's body. Our hero, consumed by terror, immediately started running, at the sight of his enemy's wicked expression. He realized he had remembered the fear he felt back when he was tortured. Makoto scrambled away, as the giant leisurely pursued him, walking menacingly slow. The immortal let out a defiant yell, as his severed arm, lying on the ground, whizzed toward its target. Without even a glance, the villain effortlessly shattered the arm and its magic. Arrogantly sensing Shin's little trick, the enemy scoffed. He wouldn't fall for such a pathetic ploy. Right after that, he delivered another gut-wrenching kick to the boy's stomach, with a smug sense of superiority. Then, he casually stomped on his head, and demanded how the boy had gotten so strong in such a short amount of time. He warned that he would keep pummeling him until he got his answer. Judging by the boy's pained expression, Kong Ho realized his sister had to be nearby, and declared that, after finishing Shin, he'd then go after Minori to destroy her too. Curious if she'd provide as much entertainment as much as Makoto was. Our protagonist, enraged, but he was paralyzed, enduring kick after kick to the head. Finally, the giant stomped down hard, crushing his head, planning to restrain him before he could regenerate. But in a flash, the protagonist vanished from the spot, only to reappear behind Kong Ho. Red and black lightning surged and crackled around his body. His regeneration was supercharged, faster than before. Shin disappears in a flash. Instantly, he reappears before his foe, already winding up a punch. A massive shockwave erupts as their fists collide, unleashing an incredible burst of energy. Kong Ho notes the boy's newfound speed, but quickly dismisses him as powerless, believing Shin is utterly overwhelmed. He unleashes a flurry of blows Shin can't withstand, taunting if his regeneration is finally failing. Kongu lands a devastating punch on the boy's arm, causing it to explode, and Shin recoils, a grimace of sharp pain on his face. The villain wonders aloud, how much longer can Shin's weak defense last? Soon after, another brutal kick slams into our protagonist. He loses another arm. Shirkera claims he's just regenerating, mindlessly defending himself, calling him utterly incompetent. Then, seeing Shin crack a small smile, he demands to know why. The protagonist replies, "He just had a brilliant idea. He's glad Kongu is such a brainless idiot." Shin notices that all his severed limbs are imbued with that pulsating red and black energy. Our protagonist then commands all these detached body parts to move. His severed limbs spring to life, attacking the villain, who scoffs, unimpressed by such weak blows. He easily defends and counterattacks all the fists, but is utterly surprised by their newfound strength. He finds it bizarre as the boy was trembling in fear. Just moments ago, our hero is still terrified, yet something powerful is brewing inside him, something strong enough to channel all his burning hatred into his attacks. He charges a mighty punch with his remaining arm, enveloped by crackling, magical lightning. As he lands the punch, he manages to blow his enemy's arm into countless pieces, leaving him utterly in shock. Shin challenges him, daring Kongu and him to a true contest of strength. This enrages his enemy, who screams, he'll turn that immortal into his personal punching bag. Kongu charges at him like a raging bull, vowing he will never regenerate again, because he'll be torn to absolute pieces. Our protagonist then commands all his severed arms to gather into one colossal limb. He thus creates a massive singular arm, and uses it to unleash the strongest punch of his life. The giant arm's punch connects hard. The enemy is sent hurtling from the incredible impact. Shin addresses Shirkera directly, asking how it feels to lose a contest of pure strength. He declares that all the hatred and fear the brothers felt will be carved deep into the villain's very body. A week later, after the battle with Kongo, we find the guild heroes gathered at their base. Kira asks Saya about the preparations for facing the next demon lord are progressing smoothly. Saya replies that they are, indeed, and insists they must work hard for Abe Toro's sake. For a moment, Haruto seems to have forgotten Toru even exists. Saya finds this strange after a brief pause. Kira quickly says he was just joking, remembering Abe. After that rather awkward moment passes, Saya then mentions he hasn't seen Shirkera around. Kira says Shirkera is looking for the brothers, and casually comments that the two brothers served as good punching bags. He then tells the swordsman not to worry, assuring him Shirkera will bring the brothers back soon. The attitude of the two leaves Saya feeling deeply uneasy, and he thinks that when the brothers finally return, he'll train them to their absolute limits. Just then, an employee bursts in a frantic rush to give the heroes some news. He reports a package was just delivered, but warns it's no ordinary delivery at all. Saya and Kira rush over to see the contents, looking incredibly worried. Aya tells them to see for themselves what's wrong. That's when Saya notices gruesome parts of Kongo's body, instantly recognizable by a distinct tattoo. Everyone is certain it's Shikara's arm, no doubt, and they become profoundly concerned. Aya casts a spell, confirming it's no illusion. They are indeed his real body parts. Saya reacts with shock, wondering who could have possibly eliminated such a formidable opponent. Aya carefully observes the cruel cuts, and the chilling fact that the body parts were sent to them, concluding it must be someone with a profound grudge. Since Shirkera was searching for the brothers, they immediately assume the boys are responsible for this. I can't believe those two actually had the power to defeat that brute. Kira finally says he already had his doubts when Taro was defeated, considering he was the weakest of them all. But Taro was still stronger than most hunters out there. And now Shirkera, one of the world's strongest, has been utterly defeated. Sarah is absolutely certain the brothers are far stronger than they have any right to be. The swordsman is utterly outraged, completely unable to believe they became powerful enough to eliminate Kongu in such an incredibly short time. Haruto then demands to know how they gained such power so quickly. Saya explains their secret. They achieved it by repeatedly killing each other hundreds of times, all to level up. Kira adds that by defeating a higher level enemy, you earn a massive amount of experience points. The brothers likely killed each other over and over again, to power level at an insane rate, becoming strong enough to finally exact their revenge on the Byakuran Guild. This shocking revelation leaves Aya and Saya completely frightened, but they desperately try to remain calm. Even while feeling terrible for Shirkera, They must think about their next move. Aya casts a spell to stabilize Saya's troubled mind, telling him he absolutely needs to rest. He thanks her and quickly leaves the room, while Haruto asks the mage to grant him a moment of solitude. Once she departs, Haruto picks up the severed arm of his former colleague, not feeling even the slightest bit intimidated. Sending a piece of trash like this to confront him doesn't even make him flinch. If they believe they'll achieve their revenge with just this, they are sorely mistaken. Still, the fact that they concocted a plan to defeat Kongu was quite impressive. Stepping on his former comrade's eye, he scoffs, calling the brothers absolute idiots. However, the eye actually belonged to Makoto Shin, who had been covertly watching everything through it. Now that it's been utterly destroyed, he loses his vital connection, and decides he desperately needs to gather more information from the enemy base. He's also worried about Minori, and is heading back to take care of her. After all, the girl was patiently waiting for him, right in front of the guild's base. Sending the package was a perfect excuse to go shopping in the city, since the dungeon food was absolutely subpar. And get this, his clothes are enchanted with some sort of body memory spell, so even if they get torn or grubby, they automatically repair themselves, which is incredibly handy. He brings a few souvenirs back for Minori, who's patiently waiting alone for his return. As he makes his way back to the dungeon, leaping over buildings, he spots something odd. Armed hunters are chasing someone. Our hero freezes in his tracks, and realizes the person being chased is a young woman. He initially decides it's best not to get involved, since that whole area is controlled by Byakuran. But just then, the hunters surround the woman, thinking they've finally got her. Seeing the girl is no longer running, the protagonist quickly realizes he can't just ignore these aggressors. He leaps down from the building and charges the hunters, landing powerful punches on both of them instantly, before they can even utter a single word. Knowing full well there must be a reason this girl was being chased, he tells her to make a break for it and get away, recognizing her in the process, and wondering what on earth she's doing here. Meanwhile, as all this chaos unfolds, Minori waits for her brother's return, perched patiently on a tree branch. He finally returns, and his sister immediately asks what's wrong, noticing the hooded girl he's carrying in his arms. When she asks who the mysterious girl is, the protagonist tells her to calm down for a second and take a closer look at the person's face. Minori looks absolutely shocked to realize the person is herself. They both have the exact same face. Ishiki Seiya is the proud commander of the illustrious Byakuya Guild, and easily the world's best swordsman, an S-rank with his gentle, captivating gaze. He's highly popular and absolutely adored by women. His friendly nature and good humor win everyone over effortlessly. However, few people know his true, wicked nature. One day, while he was relaxing in a hot tub with several girls, one of them accidentally spilled wine into the water. Saya became absolutely enraged, and promptly eliminated the girl for this trivial reason. In the past, upon seeing Minori in chains, he had called her the best. Unlike other women, no matter how much he broke her, she was simply unkillable. He proved his point, cleaving her with his sacred blade, basking in her terrified screams. For him, torturing women brought the greatest joy in the world. Shin grew irritated that he always targeted Minori. To shut his older brother up, Saya shoved his sword into his mouth. Saya found torturing men utterly dull, preferring to attack and play with women. He violated her right in front of his brother, demanding she scream louder. After completing his twisted act, he headed to the base's elevator, where he spotted Kira and Taro talking. I watched them both enter a room supposedly restricted to everyone, except Haruto. Saya tried to peek from behind the door, but Kira noticed him and told him not to. The swordsman apologized, saying he was just curious. After seeing them enter the room together, Kira said he was just throwing something away, and asked if Saya wanted to take a look. Curious, the swordsman entered the room, and was met with the sight of several tubes containing clones of Minori. Haruto explained that he had asked him to create several clones of Minori Kiryu. The idea was to mass-produce them using Nyo's power. so he could level up even faster. They used Byakuran's resources and Teru's technology to create the clones, but the plan didn't work. Their regeneration ability was incomplete. After being eliminated 10 times, the clone would no longer regenerate. Furthermore, they didn't grant any experience points when defeated. Even after trying to improve them, Taro found the task too difficult and ultimately useless, so they decided to get rid of them all. Saya asked if they were really throwing them all away. Taro replied that there was a little trick. He intended to use the clones as much as possible before discarding them, but confessed that he wasn't satisfied, as they weren't real in a perverse manner. The world's greatest swordsman asked them to give him. The Teru clones argued they were completely useless. They had no emotions, no self-awareness, just defective dolls mindlessly following every command, which Saya, of course, found absolutely perfect. But thought it was quite bizarre that Saya was so hyped up about these dolls. But Saya explained he simply didn't grasp it. It wasn't about liking dolls at all. No, it was about Minori Kiryu. He was obsessed. He wanted to use them, to play with them, in every twisted, perverse way imaginable. In his sick, manipulative mind, he believed all rights to her belonged to him. Kira commented he wasn't obsessed with her. No, he was utterly dependent. Haruto, in turn, called Saya the worst scum alive. Back in the present, the clone and the real Minori finally met. Both stood in shock, utterly stunned by the sight. Our protagonist asked if his sister was alright. The clone then revealed that there were still a dozen other Minoris, still being used by Ishiki. She explained that, even though they were supposed to be devoid of emotions, the truth was they actually had feelings. The clone couldn't quite explain it, but everything changed when, purely by chance, she saw the real Minori's face on TV. Something warm ignited deep inside her. At the very same time, she realized the profound hatred and resentment she felt were all directed straight at Ishiki Seiya. As soon as she grasped this new emotion, she immediately escaped from the mansion. She told them there were still others, just like her, trapped in the mansion, and begged for help to save them. The protagonist then had a brilliant idea: to use the clones to eliminate Saya himself. The girl didn't understand how that was possible, and he explained that, since Ishiki didn't know the clones had emotions, he would surely let his guard down around them. They could use this very strategy to take him down. Minori, however, asked what would happen if he discovered their plan. When he replied that, in the worst-case scenario, they would all simply be eliminated, his sister absolutely exploded with fury. She slapped Shin Makoto hard across the face, arguing that those girls never asked to be born. Now that they were finally alive, they shouldn't be used as mere tools and then abandoned to die. These girls, created from her own cells, were essentially her sisters. If her sisters were crying out for help, it was only natural that she'd want to save them. He questioned him further, asking if sacrificing all of them to achieve a single goal was truly the perfect chance to get revenge on Saya. Our hero felt a heavy weight on his conscience, realizing this path would make him just like those monsters from Byakuran. The clone then declared they would save all the others. To redeem himself, the protagonist vowed he would eliminate Ishiki Seiya with his own hands. For treating her sisters like absolute trash, he apologized for scaring his sister, and said they'd head to the mansion together to save them all. And so, the two siblings stepped through the portal, emerging from the forest and heading straight for the mansion. Meanwhile, Saya was punishing one of the clones, furious that another like her, supposedly mindless, had managed to escape. She penalized the others for failing to stop her escape. She then ordered them to hunt down the fugitive and bring her back, an order they obeyed promptly. Minori's clones raced through the city streets, chasing a hooded figure. The pursuit continued until the hooded girl stumbled over a box, losing her speed instantly. The clones seized the opportunity, lunging at her and pinning her to the ground. They signaled that they had found and captured their target and were now returning. From the top of a nearby building, the protagonist and his sister watched the entire capture unfold. He remarked that, as expected, they had followed her after the staged escape. The plan was officially in motion. The protagonist handed one of his ears to his sister, Minori, while she marked an X on her face to serve as bait. With his body manipulation ability, he could hear everything happening inside the mansion, through the ear. If anything went wrong, he would appear instantly to protect her. Arriving at Ishiki's mansion, it was far grander than he'd ever imagined. The clones then knocked on the door, announcing they'd caught the supposed fugitive. Saya demanded to know why number 10 had run off.
Feigning submission, Nori apologized,
Claiming she'd chased a mysterious shadow, but she'd already dealt with it. She assured there'd be no more trouble. He warned her if she acted alone again, she'd be discarded then and there. Just then, Haruto called Saya for a remote meeting, ordering him to eliminate her before his return. The clones obeyed without question, and our hero heard everything through his powerful spell. The girls then led Minori to the grim spot, where she was to be eliminated. In the center of the room lay the lifeless bodies of other clones, and the sight utterly terrified the girl. While the others mechanically cleaned the area and disposed of the corpses, Minori began to weep, finding it all incredibly cruel and horrific. Clone number 10 then desperately urged number 3 to flee with her, to avoid such a tragic end. The other, however, questioned why they would ever do that, since serving the master was their sole purpose. Nori tried to coordinate an escape for all of them, asking if they truly understood what they were doing. They replied they were merely disposing of bodies. She insisted, "You'd never be happy if you stayed there," trying to wake them up to reality. But the girls just asked what is happiness, stating they were slaves who existed only to serve their master, with no need for thoughts or wills of their own. They existed only to be used, punished, and to offer their bodies as ordered. Hearing the clones think of themselves as mere objects, the protagonist grew enraged at that maggot Saya, insisting this is fundamentally wrong. Minori then shouted she knew herself better than anyone, and hugged her counterparts tightly. She knew they had suffered immensely, and that everything had been unbearable and agonizing. The clone being hugged asked to be released, but Minori simply wouldn't let go, asserting that they did have their own will, and a true sense of self. They simply didn't know how to express it. She boldly declared she would rescue them from that situation. Number 3 was utterly bewildered, but a strange feeling stirred deep within her. Just then, Ishikawa dramatically kicked the door open, abruptly interrupting them. He fumed that he hadn't given the girl permission to speak. He furiously punished them, delivering harsh slaps to their faces. He coldly declared number 10 defective, and deemed her ready for immediate disposal. This brutal scene triggered Minori's repressed memories of the horrific torture she endured herself back when she was imprisoned at the Byakuran base. Saya drew his menacing sword, observing the raw hatred etched onto the girl's face. Suddenly, one of them dared to order the master to stop. He punished number 3 for her audacity in giving orders, brutally striking her with the hilt of his sword. Watching them all slowly regain their consciousness, he grew utterly fed up. He decided to eliminate them all in one fell swoop. As he swung his deadly blade towards number 3, the original Minori heroically stepped in front of her. When Ishiki realized she'd protected her own counterpart, he was genuinely shocked by this selfless act. However, as he inhaled and tasted her vital fluid, a shocking familiarity hit him. The girl lunged to attack him, but he was far too swift. He plunged his sword directly into Minori's chest. Only then did he realize this was the real Kiryu, Minori, and the protagonist heard every agonizing detail through the spell. After his sister is brutally discovered by the villain, Shin immediately embarks on his perilous rescue mission. Moving at blinding speed, he invades Ishiki's heavily guarded mansion. The alarm blares, and the enemy instantly realizes that Minori's brother has come for her rescue, declaring that Shin will face utter hell, as his mansion is guarded by countless armed clones. These are highly trained combat clones, and disturbingly, they all look like Shin's younger sister. The villain expresses a morbid curiosity, eager to see how far Shin can truly go. While the protagonist expertly dodges every single attack, the clones desperately try to strike him with spears, but our hero flawlessly evades each brutal blow, until a devastating surprise attack finally lands, and his arm is gruesomely decapitated. And just like that, out of nowhere, clone number 10 materializes, ready to assist. Shoving aside the warrior who just attacked him, The other clones demand to know what number 10 is doing, and she explains that Shin is, in fact, the original, the eldest brother of them all. The warrior scoffs, declaring she couldn't care less, since the master's order is to eliminate all intruders, and for protecting an invader with no exceptions. That number 10 has now become a target herself, and is officially deemed an enemy. The clones immediately prepare to eliminate her, but just then, Shin recovers, snatching his mask. As he slams it onto his face, an immense, swirling energy erupts around him. He then tells clone number 10 to let him handle everything. Elsewhere, Saya slashes Minori's face and laughs manically as she cries out in pain. He grabs her hair, smelling it and absolutely reveling in the scent. Fueled by his excitement, he throws a devastating punch that sends her flying, thanking them for eliminating Shirkara and Teru. As he was getting quite annoyed with both of them, Saya questions why she even returned, after managing to escape his grasp in the first place, asking if she came back to be his once more. Just then, he brutally kicks her in the face, filled with hatred for how he'd toyed with her, and her clones. Minori gets up, grabs a dagger, and exclaims that she will never forgive him. Saya mockingly asks if she wants revenge for being tortured by him all these years, noting that she even changed her path to try and rescue the clones. To prove his point, he snatches clone number 3 and brutally decapitates her right in front of Minori. In shock, Minori screams in panic and tries to wound him with her small dagger, but he, an expert swordsman, doesn't get a single scratch. To demonstrate his overwhelming superiority, he tears off Minori's arms with his sacred blue sword, and then mercilessly kicks her away. He argues that the clones aren't living beings at all, and that he just plays with them until they break. To prove his twisted words, he eliminates another one, right after our heroine tries to save the fallen clone, and glares at him with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, which is exactly what Ashiki wants, for her eyes to fill with pure despair. The moment Minori steps in front of another clone, to protect her he attacks again with his sword, and as her arms are severed once more, she casts a spell screaming for the villain not to move. Saya, however, states that she doesn't understand the situation. Those she desperately tries to protect are nothing but useless disposable dolls. Seeing her desperation to save her kind, he laughs and says she must ask properly. He orders Minori to put her head on the ground. When she glares at him with hatred and refuses, he plunges his sword into another clone's stomach, asking if she really doesn't want to save them. Then, filled with fury, he screams for her to obey. He warns her that if she refuses to kneel, he will continue to eliminate her kin, and proves his point by throwing small daggers at the clones, taking them down one by one. Finally, the girl drops to her knees and begs him to stop taking out another clone. He asks if stop is the only thing she can demand. Pressing her forehead to the floor, she begs him to stop tormenting the clones. He says he will only reconsider if she takes the place of his useless dolls. Pointing his sword at her, he orders her to lick his boot, stating that she has no right to refuse. He pricks her with the blade and tells her that in his presence, she can only answer with yes sir. Intimidated, Minori finally yields and answers that she will. He then opens a door, keeping his sword close to her at all times. Coldly and sadistically, he rips out her tongue in a single motion. He then takes the severed tongue, puts it in his mouth, chews and swallows it, commenting on how delicious it tastes. He then grabs her by the neck, declaring she won't escape, and begins to tear at her clothes, pointing the sword at her neck again. He demands that she show him more of that panicked expression, telling her to fight, to resist, and ultimately to submit to him. But just as he's about to commit the act, Saya takes a brutal punch to the face. Our protagonist, Shin, appears and delivers that incredibly powerful blow. After striking the enemy, he rushes to his sister to check on her. The look on her face shows she knew her brother would come. Meanwhile, Ishiki gets up, filled with burning rage, and demands to know what he did to the clones in the mansion. Shin replies that he would never eliminate the clones, since they are made from his sister. It was difficult, but he managed to incapacitate every single one. Saya finds his attitude boring, and says he would have done something much better with the dolls, like capturing them and violating them in front of their brother, over and over again. Our hero retorts that what will be more interesting is when he crushes him 1,000,000 times over. Shin throws another punch, but Saya blocks it with his sword, and only the sheer impact hits him. The villain understands how he managed to neutralize the clones with such immense strength. Immediately after, he hurls him away, and unleashes a sword technique imbued with lightning magic. This blow tears off one of Shin's limbs. However, the severed arm is enveloped by mind control magic, and flies straight toward Ishiki. The punch from the severed limb is incredibly powerful, sending the villain flying, and destroying the entire area with its devastating impact. When they reach the hall, Saya orders the clones to serve as a barrier for him. Shin finds it pathetic that he's being protected by the very dolls he'd used so much. Saya retorts, saying it doesn't matter how he uses them, after all they are his. Ending the conversation, he orders the girls to attack Shin. The hero deftly dodges the blows, seeing his original sister reflected in each and every clone, which only fuels his rage even further. Just as his sister, Minori, tries to warn him of the incoming attacks, he's struck from behind as his sister takes a brutal hit. Shin gets distracted, and the clones quickly restrain him. Desperate, he screams for them to let him go, watching his sister being attacked at the very same time. At that critical moment, Shin takes a devastating blow from behind by Ishiki Seiya. Exultant, the villain cackles that Shin should have been protecting his younger sister. Our protagonist, Shin, apologizes for causing his sister and the clones such pain. As one of the clones also took the blow, however, clone number 3 states this is her function. Butting into their conversation, Ishiki snarls her only function is to obey him. He gets enraged by Shin's glare and unleashes an attack, but our protagonist dodges every single blow. When the hero reaches a strategic high point, Saya threatens to eliminate one of Minori's clones. Just as he delivers the cut meant for the girl, Shin jumps in front and takes the blow himself, continuing his relentless assault. The villain taunts if he isn't going to fight back. If he does, he'll torture his sister in his place. Saya brandishes his great sword and unleashes the devastating wind strike, cutting Shin to pieces on the ground. Grievously wounded and in literal pieces, Saya declares he'll make him watch everything he's going to do to his sister. After kicking him, the boy gets up incredibly quickly. Seeing him regenerate, Ishiki calls him a useless undead, but Shin positions himself to protect all the clones. The girls question why he protects them, and Shin simply replies that he does it because he wants to protect his sister. Saya sneers that they are just dolls, made with Byakugan's technology, and not his real sister, calling them slaves. He orders them to eliminate Shin immediately. Desperate, Saya shouts for them to obey his orders. They, however, seem to finally understand what's happening now, and no one responds. The clones begin to understand their true origin, and the reason Shin protects them so fiercely. They all realize who the real enemy is, and start to encircle the villain, Byakugan. They turn on Saya for hurting their brother. The villain despairs as they revolt. Upon understanding their true nature, as clones of Kiryu Minori, they realize they are living beings now. They're all part of the same entity, sharing a deep connection with the original. Because of this profound link, the memories Minori originally experienced begin to surface in the clones' minds, revealing scenes where their older brother, Shin, desperately tried to protect them. Shin understands that her physical manipulation ability allows the user to actually control separated parts of themselves. Without even realizing it, Minori had shared her experiences with the clones, who possess the very same genes as her. As completely losing his mind, Saya screams, ordering the dolls to obey him, for he is their master. They were supposed to follow his orders, but now anyone who tries to hurt their brother becomes an enemy. Ishiki threatens to cut everyone there to pieces with his sword. However, Shin absolutely doesn't allow it, and lands another massive punch on the villain. As he falls to the ground, Saya is attacked by a Minori clone wielding a spear. Fallen and defeated, the villain is confronted by Shin, who asks how he should finish him. As had already been established, the original Minori wishes to do it personally. She wouldn't be satisfied unless she got her revenge with her own hands. While the clones immobilize Ishiki's arms and legs, he begs them to stop. Minori then summons a giant hammer and uses the immense weapon to strike him. But a single impact isn't enough to satisfy her fury. Kiryu Minori is determined to leave him in pieces. Before his voice fades completely, clone number 10 interrupts the moment to report that they all suffered unimaginable pain, just as dozens of them were struck down by Saya. She demands that he feel the same, wishing to see Ishiki suffer even more. Shin understands the pain and abuse they went through. By being repeatedly eliminated, it was a literal hell on earth. It's revealed that deep in the mansion's basement, a monstrous dungeon creature is kept alive and drugged, designed to violate any living being, and that includes men, just as it happened to a hunter who once defied Saya. They all agree to employ this horrific method for their ultimate revenge. Minori and Shin accompany number 10 to the basement, where they chain the villain with iron shackles. A desperate Ishiki watches as the cell opens. The gigantic creature, an emperor oak, emerges before the false hero, who cries out in sheer panic. They say a single specimen of this species possesses the power to create an entire country. Originally, the creature only targeted women, but thanks to Byakarn's drugs and modifications, it now attacks men without distinction. Minori is utterly disgusted by the scene, and Shin prefers to look away. The moment the creature tears Ishiki's clothes and licks its lips, the curtains fall, ending the disturbing sight. Minori and her brother are visibly shaken and exhausted, wishing only to rest. The clones offer to prepare tea, thanking Shin for saving them, and for not eliminating any of them during the battle. Number 10 expresses deep gratitude, not knowing how to repay their original brother. He accepts their thanks, and asks them to show him around the mansion, as he needs to gather food and intel about the Byakuran Guild. While number 3 guides him, number 10 decides to remain there until the torture is over. During their conversation, the girl confesses she doesn't know what to do in the future, as she was created without choices, and fears the world won't accept them. Shin comforts her, stating that's a lie because he himself accepts them. He assures them they don't need to seek an immediate meaning for their birth, they just need to live. Then number 3 promises that she will live the best she can. However, out of nowhere, she is suddenly decapitated with a precise, clean cut, brutally murdered right before her brother's eyes. From behind her, Kira Haruto materializes. He hasn't seen our hero in what feels like ages. To achieve this grim objective, the Byakuran hero had annihilated all other clones. He confronts Shin, a sadistic smile curling his lips. He quips that he's thrilled to celebrate their emotional reunion, but still needs to wipe out everyone else here. He unleashes a precise, lightning-fast slash with his blade, instantly severing both of Shin's hands. Our hero grunts, realizing he didn't react quickly enough, as his severed limbs rapidly regenerate. Our protagonist charges forward furiously, throwing a powerful punch radiating with magic, but misses entirely as his enemy effortlessly dodges. Kira finds him considerably slower than expected. Shin attempts a flurry of repeated attacks, but misses every single strike. Kira remarks that thoughtless attacks are utterly useless against him, then demonstrates exactly how it's done, as he prepares a devastating spell. His attack obliterates a massive section of the mansion, and directly strikes our hero's arms. Seeing the sheer devastation, Makoto exclaims, calling him a true monster. Kira simply scoffs and mocks him, finding it quite amusing for an immortal to say such a thing. With one arm utterly destroyed, our hero desperately tries to activate his regeneration as quickly as possible. However, he's plunged into despair. Upon realizing his ability isn't working at all, Kira reveals that a special spell on his sword has completely nullified Shin's regeneration. Our hero feels a cold surge of fear, as Kira is unlike any other member of Byakuran. He can't imagine a single way to defeat him, and now only wants to ensure his sister escapes safely. Therefore, he doesn't care if he doesn't make it out of this alive. Shin then asks how Kira discovered his location. Kira explains that Ishiki's reports suddenly stopped, so he came to check on the situation himself. He then ran into Makoto.
Lucky for Kira.
But incredibly unlucky for our protagonist. Our hero then asks who else is in the mansion, since Kira used the plural when referring to the people present. The false hero knows Shin's sister is there, but he has absolutely no interest in avenging his fallen comrades. In fact, he's even thrilled that the guild members were eliminated, because it meant Shin and his companions had leveled up by defeating powerful S-rank members. Now, if Kira eliminates them, he'll gain an insane amount of levels. Our hero thinks he's completely unhinged, although a part of him actually agrees. The false hero couldn't care less. In an instant, he vanishes from right in front of the protagonist, and reappears, plunging his sword into his stomach. The blow gravely wounds him, and as Shin collapses, defeated, Kira gains an unfathomable number of levels, feeling an overpowering wave of euphoria. However, Shin refuses to back down. He invokes a spell that binds Kira's feet, declaring that he will still eliminate him. Using the sacred dome of the sanctuary, Kira repels our hero, sending him flying, and declaring that he won't be defeated. At his current level, the protagonist can't even touch him, and continues to take blow after blow, losing his vital fluid, his regeneration. Can't keep up against Kira's absolute power. The enemy then offers Shin a chance. If he surrenders and goes quietly, he will leave his sister in peace. But if he resists, he will capture him first and then the girl. Shin asks if he's lying, and Haruto replies that it all depends on the protagonist's actions. In a total panic, Shin kneels before the enemy and asks him to take only him. He begs him to spare his sister, and Kira laughs, mocking his lack of dignity and pride. But in truth, Kira was lying and planned to eliminate them both. Filled with rage, our hero screams and tries to punch Kira, who dodges backward. At that moment, all the remaining clones and the original Minori appear to protect their brother. Haruto notes that Shin took good care of them, and that there are still some left. When Minori appears, the protagonist yells for them to stop. They are no match for him. The clones begin to be destroyed one by one, but they declare that even if victory is out of reach, they can still buy precious time for the two to escape. As Haruto charges towards Shin, the clones selflessly sacrifice themselves, hoping to repay him for rescuing them from their living hell. Using an instant teleportation spell, one of the clones successfully transports the two siblings out of there, safe and sound. Kira misses his attack, and realizes a spell of that magnitude would demand an immense amount of mana. Seeing the caster collapsed on the ground, he finds the situation problematic. However, he knew that, even if all the clones attacked him simultaneously, they wouldn't stand a chance of defeating him. Suddenly, one of them rips open her blouse, revealing a final desperate trick, tied to her original purpose. After all, Ishiki had planned to use them repeatedly, and then cruelly discard them. Clone number 10 activates a magical biological bomb, unleashing the soul energy, condensed within a crystal embedded in her chest. With their final burst of strength, they thank Shin and Minori before detonating themselves, obliterating the entire mansion with overwhelming power. Sajiri Aya was widely considered the most beautiful woman in the Byakuran Guild. With her stunning looks, gentle demeanor, and impartial attitude, everyone fell for her. However, only those unfortunate enough to spend time alone with her discovered the terrible secret. She hid like a certain man who caught her bathing in vital fluid and witnessed her true, horrifying face. 6 months ago, she descended into the secret bunker in the guild's basement. Upon entering the room where the siblings were imprisoned, she checked how much fluid had been collected. Noticing the progress was only halfway, she decided to speed up the extraction rate. When the machine stopped, she went to the panel herself and restarted it. The helpless siblings then saw a giant fan materialize. Directly below them, the blades began to spin at a dizzying speed. The two panicked, slowly being ground into oblivion. As she watched the grim scene unfold, the mage, Aya, cackled with sadistic glee. Though this method didn't help her level up, it was utterly meaningless to her. As long as she could extract their tomato sauce, indulging in that was more than enough. He'd always imagined immortals would look like shambling zombies, never that they'd possess such unbelievably soft skin. No matter the torment they endured, their skin always regenerated flawlessly, becoming as smooth and delicate as a newborn's. This was every woman's ultimate dream: eternal youth, everlasting beauty, and ceaseless vitality. Men and money would flock to her effortlessly. She felt an intense envy for the siblings, for being born with such an incredible ability. Just by consuming their vital fluid, she could maintain her youth and radiant skin forevermore. She had truly stumbled upon the formula for eternal youth, and now she craved even more of that precious blood, all for herself. Kira, the guild leader, watched the entire ordeal with a proud expression. Back in the present, though, when the guild leader arrives at the scene, he no longer finds any trace of the siblings. He immediately wonders if the two somehow managed to escape. Kira then calls Aya, feigning sympathy. But the mage is absolutely furious. She demands, her voice laced with seething anger, "Where are those siblings? And why haven't you captured them yet?" Kira informs her that they eliminated Saya and escaped again, but Aya couldn't care less. She just wants him to capture them immediately. Kira doesn't quite understand the sudden rush. After all, they still have plenty of blood in stock. She, however, argues that the blood needs to be absolutely fresh to be truly effective, as without a constant supply, her beauty and youth would simply fade away. Kira bluntly states he doesn't care about her youth, and complains that she's yelling far too much. Aya, enraged, calls him utterly useless, and orders him to stop messing around right now, and find those fugitives immediately. Kira's expression visibly darkens. He asks, "Since when did you become so important as to start giving me orders?" and challenges her to capture them herself, since she craves their blood so desperately. Kira pushes her buttons even further, scoffing that if she stays this stressed, she'll end up with wrinkles. That jab enrages her even more, igniting the entire area around her with her fiery rage. The mage decides she'll hunt down the two of them, personally. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Haruto wakes up, asking his sister where they are. She explains the clones blew everything sky-high near the gate, and somehow they ended up in a dungeon. Startled, our protagonist asks about the others. Minori's face falls into a sorrowful expression. Our hero is devastated he couldn't save them, breaking the solemn promise he had made. Seeing the sadness and frustration clouding his face, Minori hugs him tightly, assuring him they all would have understood, especially since he fought so bravely for her well-being. Haruto blames himself for failing to save everyone, feeling a powerful urge to atone for his mistakes. Through Minori, the clones' feelings reached him, and Haruto understood that, in the end, they all chose to stay by her side. Crying, Minori affirms that she and all the clones received his final message, their plea for him to live on for all of them. This moved him deeply, but now he feels weak and yearns to become stronger. His sister shares the same sentiment and, squeezing his hand tightly, reaffirms their pact to grow stronger together. While he was unconscious, Ikorin made a new, disturbing announcement about them. Minori, who initially thought it was news of Haruto's death, reveals it was something far worse. The bounty on their heads has been drastically increased to 5 billion per person. Hunters from all over are now after them. They need to leave the dungeon immediately, as their pursuers can track them through the teleportation points. Following a winding path, they finally find the exit, marked by an intense light. However, Haruto steps in front of Minori, telling her to stop right at the exit. A monstrous eye suddenly appears, covering the entire opening. Then its entire body is revealed, a giant, terrifying dragon. Minori shouts to her brother, saying they should run back into the dungeon, but he wants to do the exact opposite. At that moment, the dragon unleashes a destructive breath of fire that hurls the two of them away. After the heavy impact, the creature begins to fly over the area. They realize it's a high-rank monster, something that shouldn't be outside a dungeon. They don't understand why the dragon is there, but they know they don't stand a chance fighting it. The siblings begin to dodge its intense blasts of fire. As they run, they spot a city and think they're safe, since dragons don't normally attack human settlements. But to their horror, the creature unleashes a blast of fire that destroys a large part of the city. Its breath exceeds 3,000 degrees, capable of melting anything in its path. Its scales, capable of repelling even cannon fire, make it practically indestructible. Only the combined forces of several powerful guilds would make fighting a dragon a viable option. Faced with such a monstrosity, the siblings wonder how they could possibly escape. Then Shin proposes a risky idea, to attack the monster. Minori thinks he's gone insane. However, the protagonist claims they will defeat the dragon and level up. He reminds Minori of the promise they made, arguing that if they run now, they will never be able to defeat Kira. Shin advances on the left, while Minori circles the dragon on the right. The creature unleashes a breath of fire, and our hero looks for an opening to attack. He puts on his mask, activates a magical enchantment spell, and charges at the dragon. Shin attacks the dragon from above.
Initiating balanced aerial combat.
A dragon is a living creature, which means the main target should be its head. He lands a powerful punch on the creature's head, causing it to lose its balance and stagger. His hand is covered in the monster's fluid, and he feels a sharp pain, as the dragon's scales are extremely hard. Minori realizes she needs to aim for the gaps. She spies the gaps between its scales and lunges to attack. She plunges her dagger deep into those vulnerable spots, but the dragon barely flinches, utterly unfazed. Instead, it brutally whips her with its massive tail. With the girl scent flying, the beast swivels, its gaze fixed on Shin. It charges another devastating breath of fire. The scorching blast slams into Shin, full force, but his sister appears in a flash, ready to defend him. Shrugging off their desperate attacks, the monster unleashes a horrifying, macabre red breath. Minori swiftly tries to block it with a defensive spell. Even her magic shield proves insufficient, as the blast slams into her. Her hand is instantly severely injured. These black flames, which devour magic itself, continue to burn, inflicting excruciating pain. She recalls her fallen clones, and that memory ignites a furious resolve. Determined to grow stronger no matter the cost, she brutally tears off her own arm, a desperate act to halt the pain and the flame's relentless spread. She confronts the dragon head-on, just as her brother slowly rises. He declares, his voice unwavering, that this fight is far from over. This marks the first time ever. His bones have been completely melted away. He'd fully anticipated such an outcome from a dragon's breath. Now recovered, he coldly tears off his own hand. He imbues it with powerful magic, then hurls it at the monster. The magic-shrouded hand strikes the creature with devastating force, and for the first time, the dragon shows a clear reaction of pain. Seizing the chance, Shin roars for his sister to act, and she immediately charges forward. The monster girl knows she needs even stronger magic, and screams, unleashing her full power as she attacks the dragon. Minori unleashes her infernal black flame magic, with all her might against their formidable target. The dragon screams in agony, its immense power beginning to falter. Immediately after, the protagonist appears directly before it. He molds his severed limbs into a single terrifying weapon, compressing all his strength into a single piercing point. His unified strike pierces the dragon's impenetrable scales. He then slams a massive blow onto the monster's head. It reacts with a horrifying, final scream. The devastating attack drives the beast deep into the ground, finishing it off completely. And with the victory, the protagonist gains several levels. From their hard-won victory, both siblings find satisfaction. With the creature finally defeated, Minori feels her true abilities awakening. After their fiery confrontation with the dragon, as they calm down, they can't help but wonder why a dragon was even there. They hadn't seen it when they passed through this area earlier. Our hero deduces that someone was controlling it, because of the sinister purple glow in its eyes. It was the very same glow that appeared when they were hypnotized during their agonizing torture. To be able to control something so monstrous, with hypnosis magic, it could only be the mage Aya. As soon as he utters her name, several more dragons begin to fly over the island. Perched atop one are two well-dressed figures, armed with swords, who immediately jump down. The protagonist instantly suspects they are also being controlled. They immediately charge at him and Minori, proving his point. One of them hurls his sword at the girl, who expertly dodges by rolling on the ground. Enraged, the protagonist unleashes a powerful punch that sends the attacker absolutely flying. Immediately after, an even huger dragon appears, preparing a truly terrifying breath attack. When it finally unleashes the attack, it absolutely obliterates the surroundings, and the protagonist immediately notices the explosion itself hit a much larger area than the previous dragon's attacks. This means their position has already been discovered, and more enemies are appearing. Shin decides to handle the dragon himself, and asks Minori to deal with the hunters, who also seem to be under hypnotic control. But seeing their immense strength, Shin tells her to fall back, realizing he almost put her in a dangerous situation. He declares he'll handle everything himself, but Minori is terrified to let her older brother do it alone. Remembering what happened at the mansion against Saya, she gets an idea and tells her brother she can't let him handle everything alone anymore. After all, this is their revenge. United, they charge at the hunters, casting powerful fire spells. Minori skillfully defeats 3 of them at once. As the dragon prepares a chilling ice breath, Shin bravely charges forward and is hit head-on, with half of his body gruesomely torn off. He uses body manipulation to launch an attack. Using a severed part of himself, however, the dragon bites his legs, halting the assault. Shin cleverly counters with a potent poison infusion, sending excruciating pain surging through the creature. It collapses in defeat, granting him countless levels. The hunters relentlessly assault Minori, but she gracefully dodges every single attack. Seeing even more enemies materialize from above, she's forced to conjure her magic shield to protect herself, until she's stabbed in the back. Realizing there are simply too many targets, she decides it's time to unleash her full power. She unleashes a devastating black flame expansion, engulfing multiple enemies at once. She warns her brother they need to end this quickly, to avoid any permanent damage. Even with the black flames searing their flesh, the hunters unerringly get back to their feet. The hypnosis magic forces their absolute obedience, keeping them upright despite their severe injuries. Suddenly, all the controlled monsters and hunters begin to systematically retreat. They fall into formation, as do the dragons, waiting for Sajirai Aya to emerge from a swirling portal. The siblings realize Kira isn't with her. Arrogantly, the woman seems to believe she can handle them alone. She reveals she shares the 5 senses with all those she's hypnotized, and that's how she tracked them to the island. He comments that she was brave to come to them, without Kira Haruto by her side. She replies that she doesn't need him to face 2 opponents she deems utterly weak. Minori conjures her formidable black flames, and states that pride always goes before a fall. She attacks the mage, who completely dispels the magic, and remains without even a single scratch. The mage used a gruesome shield of living beings to protect herself from the attack. This absolutely enrages Minori, who cries out that Aya has no regard for human life. As one of the hunters falls to the ground, defeated, the mage declares human life is meaningless to her. As long as she is beautiful and strong, that's all that matters. The rest are disposable. Minori believes there is no hierarchy in life, but the mage vehemently disagrees. She declares they're trapped in an illusion, and she's about to shatter it. Suddenly, Aya unleashes a purple lightning spell that devastates everything around them, carving a massive crater right between them. As Shin Makoto leaps to save his sister, Aya instantly reappears and tells him he should be far more worried about himself. She uses her hypnotic temptation, kissing him directly on the lips. Shin Makoto's eyes glow a terrifying purple, completely controlled by Aya's powerful spell. His sister watches, utterly terrified. Aya boasts he's lucky, as he won't have to do a thing, and will preserve his youth forever. Minori is absolutely furious that she's hypnotizing her brother, and charges at Aya, lunging with her dagger, but her own brother steps directly in front. Taking the blow, Aya tries to get into her head, gloating about how terrible it is to stab her own brother. Just as Minori tries to attack again, Aya makes her brother counterattack. With a massive punch, Minori barely dodges and shouts, desperately trying to wake him from the trance. She begs him to recognize her, but Aya smugly declares it's useless. Her hypnosis can only be broken by her, unless Minori can overpower it with a stronger spell. or eliminate the caster controlling Shin. Aya then orders him to attack Minori, and the boy begins to unleash a flurry of kicks. After kicking her away, he advances and prepares another devastating punch, which hits her squarely. Aya knows that Minori feels absolutely terrible being beaten by her beloved brother, who is much stronger. Minori grabs her dagger, deciding she must fight back to avoid being eliminated. Looking at her brother, she's flooded with visions of moments when he was kind to her. This distraction causes her to take another powerful hit. Lying on the ground, disarmed, she feels utterly weak, thinking she can't fight Shin. He then chokes her, lifting her off the ground, making her feel completely powerless. She starts seeing visions of her brother, protecting her in the past, and remembers the promise they made, to become strong together. Still conscious, Minori starts to murmur something. Then, consumed by pure hatred, she screamed with every ounce of her being, vowing to eliminate the wicked witch. Aya ordered Shin Makoto to tear his own sister to pieces, but Minori was the one who reacted first. Severing his limbs, she apologized to her older brother, even as she expertly dodged his attacks. And immediately after that, she unleashed the explosive black flames magic, which engulfed a vast area. Aya managed to escape through a portal, narrowly avoiding the attack. Minori had always thought that, as long as she stayed behind her brother, everything would always be fine, but that was no longer enough for her own survival. She attacked him with chilling resolve, tearing off his arms and finally, his head. However, Shin continued to fight, even without his head, landing a powerful punch on his sister. She could feel the raw emotions and apologies hidden within his blows. But it was Minori who should have been apologizing. After all, she had been weak and had always dragged him down. But that was about to change forever. Now, she would finally have the strength to protect her brother, too. As she fought, she leveled up and finally gave him a hug. During the embrace, she declared that she would become truly strong, and then exploded with an incredible burst of magic, taking Shin Makoto with her. After the sacrificial attack, Aya attempted to collect the blood of the two siblings. She wanted to recover them as quickly as possible, and grew irritated with the dense smoke that prevented her from seeing them clearly. From within the smoke, Minori's voice emerged, saying that Aya had severely underestimated her by thinking she wouldn't be able to fight Shin. But on the day they escaped from hell, they had eliminated each other several times over. An absurd amount of magical power emanated from the girl, and she declared that she had made up her mind. A long time ago, Shin Makoto thanked his sister for snapping him out of the hypnosis, and now they would fight together. Aya realized the explosion had broken her spell, and prepared to try and hypnotize him again. Aya then raised all the hunters and dragons again, ordering them to assault the two siblings. Minori, now significantly stronger, skillfully used her dagger to parry a sword attack. Meanwhile, her brother swiftly dispatched the hunter, but no sooner had he finished than a massive dragon nearly incinerated him. Thankfully, Kiryu Minori intervened, saving him by conjuring a powerful protection spell. She then unleashed her formidable black flames, annihilating the monster. The malevolent mage, undeterred, reanimated all the corpses, boldly declaring that fighting her was utterly futile. He warned them that his undead army would continue their relentless advance until their hearts ceased beating for good. He understood that if they failed to truly neutralize the bodies, they would simply keep resurrecting. The two siblings pressed on, confronting the hypnotized masses, who now lumbered forward like mindless zombies. Even after enduring a brutal beating, one ghastly figure remained upright, even with its jaw ripped away. His sister observed that their relentless movements weren't actually fueled by magic. She simply told him to just knock them out. He quickly caught on and began to pummel them, infusing his powerful fists with magic. Mid-battle, a furious roar erupted, as an enraged dragon swooped down, directly towards him, with Aya riding triumphantly on its back. The monstrous dragon brutally stomped on the hero, effortlessly pinning him to the ground. Seizing her golden opportunity, she attempted to ensnare him once more with her hypnotic spell, smugly claiming that no one ever escapes her mind control. Aya began to cackle victoriously, assuming his stamina and magic were completely depleted from the grueling battle. Confident he'd easily succumb to her spell, she commanded him to eliminate Minori. Suddenly, he knelt, gathering himself, and readied a magic-infused strike. Aya, still expectant, urged him to obey her command, but, completely shattering her expectations, he unleashed a devastating punch squarely to the villain's chin. Lying stunned on the ground, she was utterly in shock, finally realizing her hypnosis no longer affected him. The two siblings had ascended to a far higher level, rendering her magic completely ineffective against them. With her teeth shattered, Aya found it utterly impossible to comprehend that he had truly broken free from her hypnosis. In a furious rage, she began to unleash various destructive spells, aiming to finish them off. Minori, however, conjured a formidable shield, and bravely defended against every single attack, proclaiming their own immortality. Aya's fury blazed even brighter, as she conjured even more formidable spells. She unleashed a barrage of meteors, each imbued with different magical elements, but against the siblings, her spells proved useless. Kiryu and Minori effortlessly blocked every attack. Then Minori unleashed her dreaded Black Line spell. Even with the witch's formidable shield, the torrent of black magic began to shatter her defenses. She found it utterly absurd that her magic was failing. The girl's spell struck, searing her skin. Aya began to burn, screaming in agony. This was a pain Minori herself had endured countless times, all thanks to Aya's wicked magic. The suffering the siblings had faced was nothing compared to the torment Aya now experienced. The younger sister wanted her to feel it, and to ensure that, she turned Aya's own hypnosis spell against her, condemning her to an eternal, living hell. Sometime later Aya awoke, bound within the very capsule, where the siblings had suffered untold tortures. Recognizing the place, despair flooded her, and she screamed for release. Even in chains, she defiantly demanded their treasure, then attempted a lightning spell, a meteor spell, a water spell, a cutting wind spell, every spell she knew. Why weren't her spells working? She wondered frantically. Then she saw the protagonist, and shrieked for his attention, demanding to know if he was listening. Watching him work at the computer, she despaired, begging to know what he was doing. Then he pressed the ominous red button. The propeller beneath her roared to life, relentlessly dragging the witch toward it. In moments she began to be shredded, screaming in agonizing, intense pain. Her limbs were ripped from her body, but then she suddenly awoke, thinking it was all just a dream. But she quickly realized she was in the same place again, and that the pain had been terrifyingly real. Aya began to plead desperately for her life, and the protagonist pointed to a scoreboard, displaying a number that she chillingly understood. That's how many times the siblings were brutally shredded by that exact same torture. She realizes she'll be tortured that precise number of times. The protagonist presses the button once more, and the witch shrieks in agony. Finally, she awakens, realizing that she'd endured the same amount of torture as them. Aya believes that now, she'll finally be allowed to return to the real world, free from the pain. Her plan, the moment she returns, is to deal with the siblings and finish them off. However, the count resets, starting all over again, plunging her into utter despair. She thought it was finally all over, but the button is pressed, and she suffers once more. Screaming, she can't believe she has to endure it all over again. Meanwhile, the siblings notice the witch's body growing dry and wrinkled. They realize this is Aya Sajari's true form. They understand she'd been using magic to feign youth, as she was actually well over 100 years old. The protagonist explains that she'd lived for about 150 years. When the immortal tribe appeared, she discovered that, by drinking their vital fluid, she could preserve her youth. That's why she became obsessed with the siblings, and with eternal youth. Even after enduring the same tortures as them, she still desperately clung to her life. Shin, his brother, believes that if they leave her there, she'll simply die of old age. The hero decides not to finish her off, and turns to leave, until his sister notices something shining. In the distance, she finds a medallion, and realizes it's what the witch had used to control parents and children. Through hypnosis, determined, she decides she needs to end the cycle of suffering as quickly as possible. The witch wonders if hours or days have passed. Aware that her death is truly near, suddenly Haruto arrives, having sensed her presence, and finds her on her deathbed. Aya desperately begs him to finish her off, claiming she can't last much longer. Kira, however, flat out refuses and simply walks away, leaving her to suffer and cruelly denying her final wish. So she'll slowly rot, her appearance deteriorating, to reflect the true hundreds of years she possesses. Kira, in turn, senses the siblings' presence nearby, and vows he won't let them escape this time. Far away, the siblings decide to finally take a break, and light a cozy campfire in the forest. The two reflect on how far they've come, on their grueling mission. So much has happened to get them here. With each challenge, they've leveled up and grown stronger. However, they've also ended the lives of many innocents, who had nothing to do with their quest for revenge, and even sacrificed their clone sisters, a fact that heavily weighs on Minori's conscience. But it will all be over soon. The final step, defeat the greatest enemy of all, Kira Haruto. Once they eliminate him, their revenge will finally be complete. They plan to get a proper rest now, before taking that ultimate next step. Suddenly, Shin hears a noise and yells for his sister to run. The two of them leap aside, narrowly dodging an explosive strike that obliterates the very spot where they were standing. Haruto appears, satisfied to have finally found them. With his menacing sword in hand, he exclaims that he's found them. The siblings try to flee. Minori thinks it's their chance, since they outnumber him, but Shin disagrees. He knows they're utterly exhausted from the fight against Aya, and that if they don't escape now, they will be captured. However, Kira charges at them with a swift, deadly lunge. The protagonist meets him with a fierce counterattack, telling him he was the last person he wanted to see. Right now, Haruto doesn't like the sound of that, and retorts that they have a long, shared history. He says he was just planning to play with the little sister, but he's changed his mind. Now he's going to erase his younger sister. His sword transforms, sprouting eyes and growing monstrously in size. He was annoyed that she'd escaped Saya's mansion, and to vent his burning rage, he resolves to eliminate her completely, a maniacal expression twisting his face. Kira declares that because she angered him, he will erase her very existence. Consumed by pure rage, Shin Makoto lunges, with fury coursing through his veins. He throws a punch, but Haruto effortlessly dodges it. Next, Minori lunges with her dagger. The villain skillfully parries both blows, but Shin strikes again. The hero quickly notices that their combined attack was surprisingly effective. Against Kira, Minori imbues her dagger with potent magic and unleashes a powerful slash toward her target. As he dodges, the protagonist appears behind him with a devastating charged punch. Kira dodges again. Seeing the situation grow perilous, he casts a spell, imbuing his sword with dark energy, showing that he, too, is a formidable threat. Shin starts running to escape the sword's swift attacks, but tragically ends up losing an arm. He desperately tries to regenerate the lost limb as quickly as possible, but notices his regeneration simply isn't working. His vital fluid begins to rapidly drain, and he's racked with excruciating pain. His body won't move either. As Minori rushes to help her brother, she's struck from behind by a powerful kick that sends her violently flying, crashing through the trees in her path. Kira then reveals he wields the legendary sword that banishes immortals, as the wounds it inflicts never, ever regenerate. Unlike all the mere toys he used before, this weapon can truly eliminate them for good. Kiryushin falls into utter despair and screams, but Kira remains eerily calm and raises his sword, delivering a decisive slash to end his life. His blow hits its mark, and a sickening spray of blood erupts. Kira smiles, convinced he has won. However, he has tragically cut down Minori, who had thrown herself in front of her brother to protect him in that final instant. Her body is utterly destroyed, leaving Shin in absolute, agonizing shock. He collapses, beginning to sob uncontrollably, holding what little remains of Minori in his trembling arms. Her final breath whispers his name. Desperate, he attempts to weave a saving spell, but nothing works. He lets out a primal scream. Utterly distraught, he begs his sister to wake. He refuses to accept this is truly the end. Her last words are a heartfelt declaration of love. And then, Kira brutally finishes her for good. This leaves Makoto completely frozen, unable to react. Haruto, for his part, remains unbothered. He dryly comments on his distaste for emotional family moments. He knew that any attempt to eliminate Makoto would draw his sister out to protect him. Family bonds truly prove to be useful. Haruto had meticulously anticipated their every move. Makoto gazes at his sister's severed head, separated from her body, barely able to shed a tear. A long-lost, distant memory, from when they were truly free, floods his mind. He remembers her lovingly preparing food for him. The two of them would eat blissfully happy. Minori would hang the laundry on the line. She'd declare it was going to be an amazing day. He would tell her it was time for school, and they'd walk off together. She'd mentioned that Yoshida had invited her to the aquarium. Makoto found it odd, considering he thought she absolutely loathed aquariums. In truth, she didn't want to go with Yoshida. It had been a long time since she'd spent quality time with her brother. Makoto had been swamped with his part-time job, so he invited Minori to go to the aquarium with him. She happily accepted, and they made that promise. The tranquil memory abruptly shifts. As they walked casually through the village, they suddenly came face to face with Haruto Kira. He asked if they were Kiryu Makoto and Kiryu Minori. Startled, they cautiously confirmed their identities. Haruto then declared that he'd been searching for them for ages, and now he had finally found them. Instantly, he drew his menacing sword. He stated he was there for their bodies. With a single, swift slash, he sliced Makoto in half. It happened right before his sister's eyes. The girl erupted into desperate, heart-wrenching tears. But within mere moments, her brother's body regenerated. Haruto found this regeneration ability absolutely incredible. Makoto himself was unaware of possessing such a skill. This confirmed his informant's chilling revelations. They were immortal. He then unleashed another brutal strike, tearing off their heads to eliminate them both. But seeing them regenerate infinitely, no matter how many times he struck them down, he was utterly amazed. He'd never imagined such monsters existed. The true descendants of immortals. The siblings, for their part, had no idea of their own true origin. He quickly killed and subjugated them once more, stepping on their heads. From that moment on, they became his food, and the torture began. Never stopping, they were eliminated hundreds of times by Haruto Kira's merciless sword, who vowed to make good use of their bodies. Back in the present, Makoto cries convulsively, watching his sister be brutally eliminated forever. He enters a terrifying berserk mode, screaming with overwhelming, guttural fury. An immense, red energy emanates from his body after the scream, and a macabre aura surrounds him. The transformation leaves Haruto not just impressed, but even a little frightened by Makoto's monstrous presence. He's shocked to witness Makoto's new, terrifying form, a bestial figure with menacing horns. Makoto attacks him, letting out a monstrous roar, and gathering an unprecedented amount of magical power. His roar makes the very ground tremble, and creates a powerful gust of wind that sends Haruto flying. Makoto uses a spell on his sister, desperately striving to bring her back to life. Her body is healed, and Haruto simply doesn't understand, as he was absolutely certain his sword would eliminate her for good. He wonders what kind of ability that was, and what sort of bodily transformation this is. And seeing Makoto's sudden species evolution, Haruto shows a certain apprehension. This was an unprecedented event, and he didn't know what trick had been used. However, now his target was clearly the brother. Kira intends to eliminate Kiryu Makoto once and for all, and charges forward with everything he has. The moment he strikes, Makoto disappears, along with his sister, and reappears right behind Haruto. He gently places Minori's body on the ground. Haruto assumes that somehow, Makoto has learned how to fight. In his monstrous form, the hero charges forward. He aims to rip him to shreds with his razor-sharp claws. Kira expertly dodges the assault. A furious clash of strength and speed erupts between them, each fighter desperately trying to land a decisive blow. Haruto seethes with indignation. How could he reach such an immense level of power, all just from his sister's death? Meanwhile, he had to eliminate Makoto hundreds, perhaps even thousands of times just to level up. Makoto unleashes a piercing shriek and charges once more. Kira refuses to accept his current weakened state. Another brutal clash of raw strength erupts between them. At first, neither combatant can land a single blow. However, Makoto soon hurls Kira a significant distance away, making him feel true pain for the first time in ages. He admits that Kiryu is the first person to inflict such immense damage upon him. At once, he realizes there's no point in getting arrogant. After all, he's merely a descendant of an immortal being, and couldn't possibly hope to defeat him. Haruto smiles, witnessing the monster Makoto has become, a monster who barely reacts to his cutting insults. Both combatants then take a deep, determined breath, and engage in another sequence of relentless attacks and dodges. Makoto charges up a devastating black lightning spell and launches it at Kira. Haruto dodges and grows increasingly furious with the dire situation. He uses his sword, attempting to eliminate the enemy. For good, Makoto takes a deep cut to the shoulder. The attack nearly cleaves his body in two. Haruto is determined to ensure he dies for good. He leaps, attempting a powerful downward strike, to plunge his sword deep into Makoto's body. However, the protagonist has already miraculously recovered, and conjures a formidable magical barrier. Besides blocking the powerful attack, he swiftly jumps and strikes Kira, using his raw energy to knock him forcefully to the ground. With Haruto utterly down, Makoto walks slowly toward him. Kira can't believe he's about to perish. He fiercely refuses to let his end come like this. Meanwhile, Minori surprisingly awakens, even after being struck down by the sword, a blade specifically designed to nullify regeneration. She sees her brother recoil in pure fear, as Haruto also awakens a semi-demonic form. She's utterly shocked to see him like this. She thought she had been cut in half by that very sword strike, and now she wonders what in the world is happening, and if that monstrous creature is truly her brother. Then Haruto, in his true form, declares that he never thought he'd reveal it to anyone. Wings burst forth from his back, and he vows that the immortal tribe will pay a price that will be steep, fueled by pure hatred. He charges forward, ready to unleash a brutal attack. He and Makoto clash with infernal strength, emanating an immense surge of energy. His sister watches the two titans battle in the sky, with overwhelming intensity, utterly astonished. Kira attacks, a demonic expression contorting his face, trying to strike the protagonist with his sword. Makoto, however, catches the deadly blade with his bare hands, and charges a devastating magical blast that he fires directly from his mouth. The attack hits Haruto squarely, blasting him off the ground and causing him immense pain. However, he withstands it, and unleashes a powerful sword strike that slams the protagonist into the ground. He charges again, and sends him flying with another brutal slash. Makoto skids to a halt on the ground, and then lunges at the enemy, letting out a guttural scream. He bites the neck of the Byakuran's leader, who feels a sharp pain. However, Haruto takes advantage of the situation to brutally sever Kiryu Makoto's head. He believes that with his neck severed by that sword, it would be impossible for Makoto to regenerate. He asks if the immortal is finally feeling the true sensation of death. Laughing outrageously, he suddenly stops when he sees a magic circle forming from Makoto's body. Makoto's head quickly reattaches to his neck, and Haruto notices the spell's intricate geometric pattern. He sees that the circle is shaped like a clock, and realizes Makoto used a spell to turn back time. The reversal of Makoto's and his sister's deaths leaves Kira completely terrified. Laughing, he deems it impossible for the immortal to use that technique. Multiple times, Kira draws his sword and unleashes the same devastating strike. Who once vanquished the Demon King of Hell, determined to finally end this brutal duel. Makoto, in turn, unleashes a counterspell of his own, imbuing his sword with a searing purple energy. The two titans unleash their most devastating attacks, each desperate to utterly erase the other's existence. With his undeniable superior strength, Kira overpowers Makoto's assault. Confident in his victory, his blade slices right through the hero's overwhelming power, and it looks like Makoto has lost this crucial clash. However, it's at this precise moment that Minori dramatically appears, using her magic. She places her hands firmly on her brother's back, and cries out for him to win. When Makoto feels Minori's touch, everything changes thanks to her. He receives a surging new wave of power, enough to finally enact their long-awaited revenge. That he's eliminated them hundreds of times before, and that this means nothing. He claims the siblings' destiny was always to be destroyed by him. Minori replies that if their destiny is to be revived over and over, then that very destiny is about to change, because now they will erase him from existence. At that very moment, Makoto unleashes a magical blast of overwhelming power. The destructive blow, like a nuclear bomb, strikes the guild leader head-on. A few days later, with Kira's death confirmed, the results of the investigation into the Byakuran Guild were finally released. All of their heinous crimes were exposed to the public, and the truth spread like wildfire. Other hunters commented on just how bizarre and unhinged the members of that guild truly were. It became clear to everyone that Kira's true nature was anything but pure human. People sympathized with the siblings' tragic story, but the crimes they committed in the name of revenge did not simply disappear even so. Nevertheless, they were considered free, and now they wondered what they would do next, since their ultimate goal had finally been achieved. Makoto and his sister discuss where to go, but can't think of anywhere specific. Suddenly, he stands up, remembering the promise he made about the aquarium. He suggests they could finally go there. Minori is overcome with emotion and immediately agrees. Now that they finally had all the time in the world, there was so much they wanted to discuss. After all, there were moments they felt fate was about to crush them, but together they never gave up. They resolved to start a brand new life from scratch, no matter how many times it took.